So my name is Alicia Baker, and I am the chair for OKSL this year. I am also the associate professor at NSU for their Library Media and Information Technology program. And today we are in our last session of our collection development and management series. This one is titled Collaboration is Key, Working with School Administrators. And I'll introduce our speaker here in just a minute. Before we get started with that, I do have a disclaimer that the views, policies, and actions expressed during this presentation are those of the speaker and do not imply the expression of opinion of OLA or OKSL. This presentation is not intended to provide legal advice. So today we do have Lauren Sanders, who is assistant principal at Centennial Elementary for Mustang Public Schools. And I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about her background because she is a unique speaker, a unique administrator to speak with us today. So she has, I think, some great expertise that she can share with us speaking to school librarians. So Lauren?
Sure. I don't know about that, but I'm going to try. So I've been in Mustang for almost 20 years. I have taught here for 11 years. Then after I had been teaching, I've taught first through fourth grade. After that, I moved to the library, actually. We had an opening. I was ready to do something different. And so I moved to the library at the same school I was at and went to UCO and got my degree while I was after I'd already been hired while I was doing that job. So did that for several years. I had already actually had my admin degree, and our assistant principal here at Centennial was leaving. He was moving up, and my principal at the time and I worked really, really well together. We had formed a really good relationship, and we did lots of community outreach kind of things. We had lots of big programs that we had put on together and ran through the library, and we'd worked so well together that I decided to try and use the admin degree that I had and moved over to the assistant principal's job. So I have filled both roles in the same building, and the librarian that replaced me had been my partner in the fourth grade classroom. So we kind of all stayed here and kept it a little small world at Centennial, but it's been a good experience. So do you want to, what are you thinking? Do you want me to just kind of start talking about some of the things we were talking about earlier?
Yes, that would be great. Yeah.
Okay, I can do that. So we kind of visited a little bit about some of the current events and things that are going on right now that are impacting our schools through our legislature, lawmakers, state school board, things like that. And I know these are going to be kind of some hot button issues for librarians and for administrators, and it's going to be a really key time, I think, for them to collaborate and work together. One of the things I have found on both sides of the coin is that it is very, very important to build that relationship and to have a mutual trust and respect. I think that, like right now, I know my librarian, I know her heart, I know she knows her stuff, and I trust her and I trust the decisions that she's making. I feel like when I was in the library, I had the same trust from my administrators. And I think that by being open, by communicating, when you have great ideas down there, share them. Don't hide what you're doing, share what you're doing, because the more that they see you're doing and the more transparent the program is, the more they're going to feel confident in what you're doing. So I think that building that relationship is going to be key. I hope that your administrators look to you as the experts. I know that it's been a while since I have reviewed a lot of our selection policies and a lot of our, and I'm lack of word at the moment, but like our challenge policies, if a parent wants to challenge some of our materials or resources. Deep down, I know the policy for all of those, but specifically step-by-step applying that every day, you guys put eyes on those kinds of things more than we do. And so you will be the go-to for those. So being familiar with those, reviewing them consistently, being on top of that is going to be an asset to your administrators, because if something comes up, and unfortunately it probably will nowadays, you're going to be the first phone call when they say, help, we've got someone up, who with some concerns, and we need to figure out how to address that. So I think having that relationship, knowing your policies, knowing your procedures, and we had an incident the other day. It was after, and I don't know the story real well, so I don't want to misquote, but it was after the I believe it was the state school board meeting, and there was a short list of titles that had been released as being concerns in our schools throughout the state. Well, one of the titles of one of the books I recognized as being a duplicate title. So the title is an elementary title, and also is apparently another title of another book of a much more mature content that I was not aware of. But so when I saw the title, I kind of panicked, and I thought, we have that in our library, and did a little research and found out that they were two totally different books. So, and the funny thing was, when I came to school the next morning, my librarian had caught the same thing, and she had come to us and said, hey, I just want y'all to know we have this. Somebody's going to take it home. Somebody's going to say something and mistake it for the same book. Wanted you to be aware. So it's not even that anything needed to happen at that moment, but the fact that I knew that she was on top of things and was being proactive and just was aware of things that are going on and what could be potential kind of hot button issues instills confidence in me. We even let our district admin know and said, hey, just be ready, be aware, because we have this. It's not what they're talking about, but someone may think that it is. So that was interesting. That was a good experience to have the other day. So have you got anything else you can think of about in that area, in that regard, that we could add to?
I have a question for you. I love that you're talking about building a relationship and letting them know, what your policies and procedures are. As a school librarian, I remember with my principal, she always seemed so busy.
Mm-hmm.
And I always felt like I was interrupting or, just putting more on her. How do you go about building those relationships? How do you let them know what the policies and procedures are? Your librarian is really lucky because you have that knowledge already. There are a lot of administrators that do not have any background or any knowledge about what our roles are as a school librarian. So how do we get them to understand that without taking a lot of their time?
I think and I've been really blessed because I've been very, very supported while I was doing that. But I know that not everybody has that same experience, unfortunately. I know that I am busy about all the time from the moment I walk in the door until I leave. However, I'm always going to be busy, and those things are always going to be there. So if I've got one of my staff members standing there with a great idea that they want to share, I want to listen. If you don't, so even if I look busy, I mean, that's okay to me, whatever, unless it's, I'll tell somebody, I'm so sorry, I can't stop. Can you come by in 10 minutes? But that's not often. Normally we have time. If you don't feel comfortable in doing something like it, just popping by, because I was kind of famous. They always made fun of me because I would show up and go, hey, so I have an idea. And and I was very blessed that they would listen and usually jump on board with whatever crazy scheme I had come up with. If you don't have that, I would think lots and lots of pictures, posts, photographs, inviting them in. I've got one of our third grade teachers does a wonderful job with bottle biographies. And she collaborates with the librarian to do the research project. They find the books, they locate the information, they talk about all their research skills, they talk about text features. They hit all kinds of different skills with this project. And we have a sometimes we don't do it every year, but we have had a literacy night before in the spring where they can showcase some of their projects. Our that we started that whenever I was in the library, and our librarian now has continued that when we could. It's kind of been lapsed because of COVID, but I think showcasing some of those projects, I think the more that people can see what you are doing, the more they're going to want to know what you're doing. Um, if it looks like, I mean, you know how it is. If you walk by that classroom that's excited and engaged and active, you're looking in the door to see what they're doing. And I think the library is the same way. I think if you've got things going in there and people are hopping and moving and there's lots happening, people, including your administrator, are going to look in the window and look in the door and want to know what you're doing, and they're going to ask questions. So I think anything you can think of to make yourself visible. And I think the more positivity that is coming out of there is going to start to shift the tides in your favor if they're not already. I hope.
And what about those things that aren't quite as fun, kind of the behind the scene things that we do, especially like reconsideration policies? And I know at this point, right now in time, I think administrators are curious and they might seek us out and say, hey, I'm hearing this reconsideration policy, the selection policy, tell me more about it. But sometimes, I mean, later on when it's not the hot button topic, it may not be that. How do we make sure that we communicate those to our administrators without feeling like we're bothering them?
Yes. No, I get that. To me, I think the best way, and I'm trying to think outside of my own box, like for someone who may be more resistant, I would make it relevant. I would make it, for example, the other day, the school board meeting that I was talking about where there was the book. Well, the title of the book was Lawn Boy. And I don't remember who the author was or anything like that. And you all may know more than me. I know nothing about that book, but I know that we have Lawn Boy by Gary Paulson, which is in our children. I mean, it's a kid's book. So two totally different things. But I think that would have been like a fabulous opportunity for the librarian to say, hey, this title is in our library. This is not the title that we're talking about. However, just so you're aware, it's been through our selection policy. This is what the selection policy looks like. Wanted you to have this information in case it comes up, because you've just become relevant to what's happening right this minute, and something all of us, all principals want to stay off the news. Life goal number one is stay off the news. You've just helped avoid something that could, when they get that call and the parent says, I heard that you have, and then you say, okay, now wait a minute. I have this, I don't have this. Are you aware there are two different books with the same title? And I mean, you've just helped them diffuse a situation. So I think the more opportunities you can find to insert information in a way that's relevant to something that's going on is going to be your best bet.
That's great. I love that, that advice. So I hadn't heard that. Perfect. Thank you.
Good. You're welcome. I was kind of thinking about, when I was trying to think about some things to share with you guys, being relevant was kind of one of the things. I know that I have been in buildings before where the library was like closed and the doors were shut. Nobody ever saw her. Nobody ever knew what she was doing in there. And kids would like go in sometimes, get a book and get right back out. And there wasn't lots happening. I think right now, especially because so many of our kids are experiencing, holes in their learning. There's been a lot of learning loss over the last 2 to 3 years. I think that right now is a fantastic time for you to capitalize on that in the library. You have so many resources for literacy and I mean, really anything you can do math things as well, I know, but especially lots of our younger readers, tutoring programs. We've got book buddies. We've got like high school readers that come read with our kiddos, collaborating with teachers. I think knowing the standards, being familiar with the standards, the core curriculum standards if you are kind of familiar with those as well, they will overlap with your library standards, and you can hit your stuff and help the teachers hit their stuff and put together a really good experience for your students. And when you're doing those things, promote yourself. I mean, send pictures and say, hey, I took a few of these today while we were working on this. You could send them to the webmaster for the website. Send them to whoever's in charge of the Facebook page or the Instagram account or whatever it is. Parents will see you, teachers will see you, admin will see you, and they'll see that you're not just sitting behind the counter checking out books or doing all of the very quiet things that librarians have to do that we know about but nobody else does. They'll see you doing other things, and I think it's the more people are in your library, the more they're going to know what you do. Even those quiet things, they will see those the more that they come in. So that's kind of my advice, how to put yourself out there.
Yeah. And you hit on something that was one of my questions I was wanting to ask about, the standards. And you know that we actually have library standards that
Yes.
we're supposed to teach.
Yes.
In your administrator's world circle of networking,
Yes.
are other principals aware that there are library standards that we are supposed to teach? They are. Okay. Okay.
Mustang is. I know that
Okay.
Mustang is. And I think I feel like, and I can only speak for Mustang, part of one thing that we run into is we are such a fast growing district and our
Mhm.
schools are very, very overcrowded. So a lot of times our media centers are used as part of the specials rotation.
Mhm.
Um, and I see both sides of the coin now. I am not an advocate for that, but I also completely see the necessity sometimes when
Mhm.
you have
Mhm.
8 first grade classrooms. So
Mhm.
I don't really have a great answer for that,
Mhm.
but I kind of know why those things are going. In spite of that, because I know we have that's I wish that things didn't have to be that way. But in spite of that, I do feel like Mustang is a very big supporter of our libraries. I feel like they
Mhm.
understand the importance and the value and that they place value on that. And I know that our admin, could they tell you what the standards are? I don't know if they all could do that, but they do know that you have expectations.
Okay.
I hear a lot about internet safety and digital citizenship from an admin point of view. So that's going to be a key piece too,
Mhm.
that I know they're looking for and that they know you all need to be working with students on.
Okay. And information literacy and things like that.
Yes.
Yeah. And I wasn't going toward the fix versus flex. I was just kind of thinking about just knowing that we do actually have different standards, that we do try to align with the, Oklahoma, standards and things like that. And
Yes.
that was another thing that I was going to ask about. How do we, inform our administrators about our standards? How do we help
Mhm.
them to understand that, those are something that we do need to teach? And in teaching those, we do help them, better
Mhm.
understand the curriculum standards.
I think it depends. Every building's so different. Some ideas, and I know it's really hard to get out of the library sometimes, but if it's possible, if you have an assistant who's running the library and you can go to PLCs once in a while, I think that would be a great place. As teachers are there and they're talking about things that they're working on in class and what they're doing, you're like firing off ideas in your brain of what do I have that I can bring to this. Because hopefully administrators are in those PLCs as well. Instructional coaches are there. Um, I think that you can say, hey, you know what we do? One of the things that I work on in the library goes right along with that. If you all are interested, we can team up, we can collaborate on that. One time, so I got real heavy into programming and robotics for a little while when I was in the library. I had all these little, I don't even know what all they were. I had all kinds of different little bots and stuff, and was trying to teach lots of the kids to do coding things. I asked for an hour one time during one of our PD days, And I went in and I set up everything that I had in the library. I had STEM and robotics and stuff, and I let the teachers come in, and I didn't even plan anything. I just gave them all the toys and told them to go play. And so as they were testing these things out and really putting their hands on them, I was walking around the room going, "Oh my gosh, do you know what you could do with that?" And I already had some ideas in my head, but I was wanting them to be interested and then plant the seeds. So and it worked really well. I wound up doing lots of, we did the B-bots, which are the easy ones, but we did lots of math lessons with those. Um, we did some geometry lessons with some of the I cannot even remember what these things are called now, but they were like these little bots that would draw. Um, so I don't know. There were lots of good things that came out of that experience. So I just feel like the more you can talk to people, the more they're going to see how you overlap and how you can help. Um, when my teachers used to come in for lessons or check out or anything, I used to, as it was starting to wind down and their kids were starting to line up and we were all kind of standing awkwardly near the door, I would start making conversation and I would say, um, so okay, what are y'all working on this week? Because maybe I'll have something good for next week to go with it. And just those casual conversations would eventually grow to more. Some of them never took the bait. Some of them did though. And so I would say don't give up. Like keep pushing everywhere you can think.
That kind of made me think of something else. It's not only our administrators that need to realize that we have our own standards, that we need to teach, but teachers need to have
Yeah,
that realization too. And our standards are not standards that we should teach in isolation, but they're standards that really should be taught in collaboration or, in alignment with our state standards. So, yeah.
absolutely. They're going to remember it so much better if,
Yes.
in the same thing with the classroom. I mean, if they're sitting in there working on, well, like I used this example earlier, but text features. Let's say they're sitting there working on text features in nonfiction books in the classroom and they're looking at their science book. Yeah, okay, they're going to talk about it. But if they're in the library and they get hold of, I don't even know, some kind of informational text that has grabbed their attention and they get to
Mhm.
work with that book and then look at the text features within that, it's going to stick
Yeah.
with them so much more than just the normal library lesson or just the normal reading lesson in the classroom.
Right.
So, yeah, you guys can bring value and meaning to their learning by bringing their interest into it.
Yeah.
Um, that was one of the things that I was kind of thinking about as I was thinking on today. One of my goal when I was in the library, I wanted it had not been this way previously, and I wanted the library to be like the heart of the building. I mean, I feel like everything, to me, that's where the information is. That's where the programs come from. That's where the books are. That's where all the things are. And so I wanted everything to go through the library. And so luckily I was blessed with a principal who agreed with me. But I collaborated with lots of people and we had all kinds of like crazy harebrained ideas. My counselor and I did a research project on community helpers and careers, and just we put a whole vast thing together and turned it into we had speakers come in, and then we eventually capped off the whole project with a touch a truck event in the parking lot, and we brought in all kinds of different vehicles. We had like the Canadian County armored truck or whatever. I mean, we had some really cool stuff here. Um, and it all wound up in the library. I mean, and it was in the newspaper and it was on the website and it was all these places, and they saw what's going through the library. Um, I'm trying to think what else we've done. We did a summer reading program one year where, we're all locked out of the building on what they call blackout days during the summer, but my library had a back door. And so we got permission to use it. And there's a patio out there as well. So we had like bubbles and we made oobleck and we had popsicles. And I had put together a collection of books. A lot of them were weeded. A lot of them were donations. all kinds of different things. And that was what we checked out from in the summer. It was not my good collection that would truly be a loss if it didn't come back or if it was damaged, but I put together a summer collection and we checked out books. Um, and then we promoted that like crazy. And I had teachers that were excited and came up and volunteered to help. Um, I just feel like the more exciting programs, and maybe not exciting, maybe engaging, more ways you can draw people in, the more visible you become and the more support you're going to garner. So, so I don't know. I think that's kind of an important thing, being relevant, being the center of the school, and being kind of the go-to place to be.
I think we've covered a lot of material at this point. It might be a good stopping point to break and see if any of our participants have any questions. If you guys do, you can either put them in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, you can ask any questions.
Yes,
If not, then we can move on, but I just want to give you the opportunity. Okay. I do have a question for you.
Yes.
So we are really working hard. I think school librarians across the nation are working hard to kind of change the image of a school librarian. I think we're making a little bit of progress, but I still think that there are some people that are holding on to that old school image. But now we have a lot of different roles. You know, we're program managers or instructional, leaders, and we're, all kinds of things. One of them, we're advocates, but we are supposed to be like leaders in the school as well. How can we get our administrators to start thinking of us as leaders in the school?
I think you have to just push and lead. And I know that's really hard, but I think it's some of those ideas you got to run with. I think in order, I don't think it had ever occurred, like I'm thinking back to my last principal, and I hope I'm not speaking for her, but I think previously she had not really viewed the library as there. I'm trying to think how I want to say it. Like, she stayed in there a lot. There wasn't a lot of interaction between outside of the library and what was happening within the library. And so I think by coming up with ideas and getting out of the library and then bringing other people into you, I feel like the more programs you lead, the more positivity you lead, and the more change that you initiate, I think you're going to be viewed as a leader more. I have a feeling there would be a lot of principals who would be very open, surprised, but open if you said, hey, could I come down to fourth grade PLC next week and see what they're working on? I'm really looking for something to overlap with. And suddenly it's like, oh, okay. And I mean, you have taken the initiative, you've made the move. To me, a leader is someone who's going to take that initiative and who's going to come up with a plan and a solution and ideas to try and affect positive change.
What if school librarian threw out, hey, could I do a PD at some point? Would you think that would kind of throw them off? Or, I mean, just throw out ideas and see what sticks?
I hope not. So at the beginning of the year, when we get our PD schedule, honest to goodness, my principal and I are looking at each other going, oh my gosh, what are we going to do this year? Because you have a lot of time sometimes to fill. If you look throughout the entire year, I would be thrilled if somebody would come at me with an hour's worth of ideas and say, hey, could I fill an hour? I've got this that I would love to share. Sometimes they'll have certain categories that they have to operate within. Gosh, I can't come up with one of them right off the top of my head right now. But
is technology one of them?
Yes, it is. Okay. Yes, absolutely. Technology is going to be key, like your best bet. One thing that I did a few times, and I'm going to like date myself here, but staff meetings, if we had some kind of little short training or something we had to do in staff meetings, I came down one time and told my principal, I said, hey, I said, I've got, and it was Kahoot. It was when Kahoot was new. And I said, I got the cutest game. I said, if you've got something, let me plug it into this program, do it that way, because I want them to see that they can use this in their classroom. So even if it's little short bursts like that, or like for a icebreaker type activity one time, we did the Disney movie quiz on Kahoot or something like that. So it was not any earth-shattering moment, but at the same time, the teachers had a really good time. And later they're like, what was that program? And suddenly you have interest and you can start sharing ideas at that point. Did the same thing with Nearpod one time back when it was newer. And that's funny because that was several years ago that I did that, probably 8, 9 years ago. And our most recent PD session, my instructional coach was doing a session over Nearpod. So it's a different program now than it was 9 years ago, but it's the same thing. They still need those things. So yeah, I think throwing out ideas, and I think listening is key. I think if you are hearing conversations and you're hearing needs, if you can like very quietly come along and come up with a plan to address those needs and then say, hey, you won't believe what I have in store for you. I would be thrilled if somebody would come do that.
I think that you kind of touched on something, a couple of places I'm going to connect to. You
Mhm.
talked about the flex or versus fixed schedule earlier. And
Mhm.
then, so one of the kind of new terms as opposed to a flexible schedule is we call it responsive. And what you're talking about there is, you're listening to, you're trying to find the needs, and we need to be responsive to that. And
Mhm.
so that's kind of our argument about having that open schedule, is how are we supposed to be able to respond to these needs if we're stuck in this fixed schedule? So
Yep.
and you, like you said, you're on both sides of it. I know when you were in the library, it kind of sounds like you were in a fixed schedule. If we wanted to approach, I know that sometimes there's no way that administrator has any way around it, but if a school librarian was in a position where they wanted to present an argument to, or just I'm sure information for them to think about, what would be the best way to go about that, as a trying to let them see the benefits of
Mhm.
having that more open schedule so they could be responsive to the school's needs.
If it were me, I would figure out first what does that look like? Like, what's the vision that you're seeing? Do you see yourself pushing into classrooms? Do you see yourself attending PLC meetings to figure out what the standards, like to figure out what standards they're working on and how you can support that? Um, do you see yourself, do you see teachers just calling and saying, hey, I'm going to do this next week. We're working on a poetry unit. What you got? And all of those things I think are important and are key. But as you're picturing this in your mind, I think you need to go in with a plan to start with. Um, I think I would say, you know what? I want to do this, this, and this is what it's going to look like. I'm planning to attend one PLC per grade level each month. And I'm going to send a message out to the teachers ahead of time. And I'm going to say, hey, I want to come out this month. What would be a good day? When are you all going to be doing some planning and talking about some standards, some CFAs, some different things like that? What can I look at to get the most information as to how I can support you? And then I think you take that information and, they're going to say, okay, so then what are you going to do? Well, here's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to plan lessons that revolve around, test review skills or whatever the case may be. Um, I think that sometimes the ideas and the concepts are not front and center in administrators' minds. They don't see it consistently like we do. So I don't think that when you go in and say, hey, I don't really want to schedule my classes on a daily basis. I kind of want to do it as it comes up. I don't think it sounds the same to them that it does to us. And so I think if you go in and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking and here's what I want to do, could this be beneficial? Um, or even start small. Could I not schedule Fridays? Could I keep Friday open? And then if you can get any response with a small chunk of time, maximize the heck out of that small chunk of time and show everybody what you're doing. And the more that it benefits the entire school, the more support you're going to gain, and hopefully the more you're going to be able to do that. I was really lucky. There was only 1 year I was in the library, and I was in the rotation for 2 grade levels because we had 6 classes per grade level. But that was the only time that happened to me. Most Mustang schools are not that fortunate. I think that my building right now is the only one that does not have. Now, she has kind of set up a schedule to some extent. She's real flexible, but she's not part of a rotation or anything like that. Like, she has set her own schedule the way she would like it. We're one of the smaller schools, so we have had that benefit. But I know even all of the admin that I've talked to, if they can see that their librarian has got all kinds of amazing things happening that support instruction, I've always heard that they will give them anything they're able to. Sometimes it's out of their hands, but sometimes, and what teachers and probably librarians too sometimes don't realize is that a lot of decisions come from above our heads sometimes too. They're at the district level. So, yeah.
I was in a very similar situation as you, where I was in a smaller school and I had 3 classes that I was in the rotation for, and then the other time was open time, which was,
Yeah.
yeah, I was very fortunate in that. So, but then I had to schedule all the other students, make sure that I got to see everyone, and yeah.
Yes.
So, and I think also, I mean, elementary is completely different than a secondary,
Mhm.
school.
Mhm.
So I mean, I
That's
think a
true.
lot of our focus today has been on the elementary side because that's where your experience is. But looking at a secondary school, is their scheduling is completely different most of the time.
Yes. Yes. And I wouldn't, I mean, honestly, I have not spent very much time in the secondary. And so um mine has all I've done pre-K through 5th,
Mhm.
but yeah, I wouldn't even begin to know how to best support that, how to and they also don't have the same. I don't know, some of them do, but I don't believe ours in Mustang. They may teach some classes, but they're not going to wind up in a rotation all day long like an
Right,
elementary typically.
right, right. Yeah.
So
I've never heard of
that's
that. I could be, yeah, I may
no.
just not have heard of it, but I haven't in all my time. So,
Mm-mm.
um, so my last question is
Mhm,
advocacy. Advocacy is huge
mhm.
now, and with school librarianship. How can we get our administrators on board with helping to advocate for, intellectual freedom and access um, to content, I guess, but
Mhm.
more about just kind of intellectual freedom. I know there are limits, but then of course we have our selection policy and all that stuff. But just maybe um, talking about the state bills and the House bills that are you know being discussed and things like that. So,
Mhm.
any ideas on that?
I think, and it's something that makes everybody really, really nervous because nobody wants to be the district that's on the news that's getting slammed. Um, and I don't know very many administrators that want to tamp down what kids are able to get, but I also know they don't want to wind up on the news. So it's like a very fine line, and you're kind of walking that tightrope. Um, I think that to me, conversation is going to be key in those relationships. I think my librarian right now, if she is telling me that she believes in something and that she is advocating for something, I'm going to be looking at it because I trust her and I trust her opinion. I know that she's not um, I believe that she is not going to do something that is going to land me on the 10 o'clock news. And I think that they have to be able to have that kind of faith in you. And I think some of that's going to come from relationships. And those relationships are kind of rooted in conversation. Um, Standing at the coffee pot in the morning, say, oh my gosh, did you hear what bill they were pushing last night? They may not have heard. And so a lot of times now I'm figuring out, you're new, you're kind of attuned into the news that directly impacts you. And so in the library, you are going to be drawn to those stories more. There's a whole lot of other ones that the admin may be drawn to more just because it has more of a direct impact. So I think that I've had teachers, library, all kinds of people come up to me and say, "Oh my gosh, did you see what they said last night?" And suddenly I know that they're aware, I know that they're informed, and I just learned something from you. So I really think it all goes back to those relationships. I think they're going to advocate for you if they believe in what you're doing.
I think that's a great point, that you are just kind of attuned to what is, has to do with your job at the moment. And right now, especially, there's so many education bills,
Yes.
that it's hard to keep up with all of them. And I know that administrators have to deal with the financing. And I mean, you guys have to keep up with so much that we probably do need to make sure that you all know what's going on. And a lot of bills kind of die as they go along. And so maybe once they get to a certain level where it might be a level of concern, we really need to bring certain things to your attention. So I think I think that's a great point. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. I think your teachers can be your allies too, because I think the same thing. They're tired and they don't want to read a lot of those bills and things sometimes because they're just worn down and exhausted, like we all are. And I think that, as they're checking out those books and you're standing there at the door still having that kind of awkward moment where your last three stragglers are coming along with their books, that's a great time to even talk to your teachers and say, well, you know what they want to do with Dr. Seuss or what, I mean, some of those things that sound crazy, but there are people out there, like real life things that are movements that are happening. So I think I think they are a great avenue as well. A lot of if your librarian's not on your leadership team, a lot of those teachers are. And so if you can get those teachers thinking about those things and make those some priority issues, it's going to spread. So I truly believe if you're making an impact with your faculty and making yourself known and positively affecting change in the building, your efforts are going to spread. People are going to notice and they're going to be behind you when you start to try and do some things.
Great ideas. It sounds a lot. You talked a lot about relationships and trust and getting out of the four walls of the library and being seen. And I really think that it's not just the library, it's the library program. And it's not just your collection, but it's what are you doing with the collection, with the, what with your students, with your teachers, with the community. So you have to not think of the library as the books, just like you don't think of the librarian as just the keeper of the books. We're so much more. Our library is so much more. So it's kind of my takeaway from this. So
that's that's where my heart was, and that is that I truly believe. I've seen it from both sides, and I have sat in the meetings with the media specialists, and I have sat in the meetings with the administrators, and I've heard both things, and I've seen where if I'm just looking all around, the librarians who are active and out in the building and interacting with kids and teachers, they are getting more support. So the ones that are a little bit more self-contained, maybe a little more withdrawn, and no one knows what they do, and so they don't get as much support as the others. So that is my That is what I would love to leave everyone with, is the best way to advocate for yourself is through action.
That's great. Thank you so much. I'm going to give you one last opportunity to ask any questions. If you have any questions, I'll give you a few seconds. While you're thinking about that, I am going to share some information with you. I hope I'm sharing the right screen. Lauren, am I sharing the right screen?
Yes.
Thanks.
Says
Okay.
thanks. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So if you have any questions about this, you can feel free to contact me at this email address, oksl@oklibs.org. Thank you for joining us. If you are not already a member of OKSL, we would love to have you join us. You do have to be a member of OLA beforehand. We have great information, share information. OKSL is just a network of school librarians. So Becky, did you have a question? No? Okay. You will be getting a recording of this within the next week or so, and CEUs as soon as our continuing education committee can get those to you. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Bye.